So this is section 2, and we're going to talk about revolution. And then, so popular sovereignty. So during the 17th and 18th century, philosophers began to speak to people and about having a say in the government, and that's when people started to change their mind, like, oh, we should have a say in how the government works. And then, like, monarchies had different approaches to popular sovereignty, such as Great Britain and France. So, like, different monarchies, like, thought differently about people wanting to come into the government. So, like, Britain, so, like, as you guys know, Britain was always a monarchy, but now it's different. It's like a monarchy, but it's also similar to our government. And then, like, the Magna Carta, the Petition of Rights, and the Bill of Rights took more authority from the king and queen, or, like, whatever, and gave it to Parliament. So, little by little, the government from at Britain started adapting to popular sovereignty. So they didn't take it a wrong way. Well, like, not really. And then France did not react well to popular sovereignty. So the French monarchy expanded this, and space realized its authority. It was not until the French Revolution that France would see the end of the French monarchy, because they didn't really take it as well.
Who didn't take it as well?
Well, like, the people that, like, monarchy, they didn't want people to be involved in the government. They thought that they could do, like, they could rule. They didn't want people's opinion.
So why did Great Britain's go relatively smooth? I mean, it wasn't smooth. There was definitely bloodshed and lopping off the heads of certain kings and the Glorious Revolution. But if you compare it to the French Revolution, it was definitely more tame a transition than the French. Why so much difference between those two nations that are right next to each other?
Because of the Magna Carta and stuff, they
have convergent fashion.
Huh?
Well, I think it's because they still left, like, the queen and the monarchy, but they're just neutral now. Like, they don't really do anything. But I mean, they left them there so that, like, because back then they believed in, like, the divine right, and, like, that was that God gave, like, the kings and queens, like, the right to rule, which is, like, what that picture is. That's why the angel is putting, like, the crown on the king, because it's, like, so, like, to disobey a queen or a king was, like, to disobey God. So they saw that as something that was wrong, and the British left the monarchy. I mean, they're still there, even though they don't have any real power, because the national government does everything and the prime minister. But I think that's why.
So you're saying because the little bits of power were given over time from the king to the people via the parliament, it happened kind of in stages, whereas the French Revolution just had a full-on bloodbath all at once?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Latin America in the 19th century. The conquistadores settled the region, and the Spanish monarchy thought that they had gone to rival the monarchy power. In response, the monarchy created a feudal system with the encomienda system. So, it was basically that they said that the Spanish American people could only take over the crown. Like, it was their crown, so not anyone that would come into their, like let's say it's America. If someone from Spain would come into America, they couldn't just take the power. So it would just be like.
So with this encomienda and the hacienda kind of mindset, it kind of sounds like the Portuguese and the Spanish brought feudalism to Latin America. Did they import feudalism? Is that one of the things they brought with them? Or a form of feudalism? Were most of the people here, most of the natives and pretty much subject to the will of the few over here? Is it a caste system with the haves all the way down to the have-nots? Because you taught us about that yesterday, about feudalism, right?
Yeah.
And I guess the point is there's a reason they put that first, is because when the Portuguese and Spanish came over here, they pretty much carried on that system of the king's at the top, he has lesser lords, and then those lords have haciendas, encomiendas, and they have all a bunch of serfs. And everyone else does what the, you know, kind of forced into that.
The encomienda system set the stage for large land holdings to emerge political and economic power in Latin America. Napoleon's invasion of Spain had a major impact on Latin America. Many colonists rejected Napoleon's replacement and remained loyal to Ferdinand VII, independence.
In other words, the descendants, the natives here and the Portuguese and Spanish didn't like the French because Napoleon took over everything. And they're like, who are you? You don't control us. We were still tied in with the Spanish and the Portuguese.
Yeah. Agustin the Iturbide. Okay. Engineered Mexico's independence in 1821. Mexico and many states of Latin America fell in periods of civil war on through the 19th century. Most of Latin America won independence from Spain and Portugal in the decades after Napoleon conquered Spain and left the country too weak to control colonies. Obstacles to stabilize.
So you're saying this is the first time the people in Latin America saw a crack in the armor.
Yeah.
And since the Spanish and the Portuguese were weakened by the French, they saw an opportunity to what? To get self-governance and move towards popular sovereignty. Was it a smooth transition to the people taking over?
No.
Why? Largely because of which system that had been brought over? The feudal system, right?
In the struggle to stabilize itself, Latin America had to fight political issues. They tried to claim freedom like the U.S., Great Britain, and France, but wouldn't be able to because independence in Spain meant to desire a new royal authority. After Caudillas, the leaders of armed militias, was in government, he faced rebellion issues because he did little to solve economic problems and underdevelopment of their countries.
The Mexican Revolution. So, as you all know, Diaz was a dictator or whatever. So, he brought Mexico its first long period of stability and economic growth. And then Madero, is that how you say it? He was the first to organize opposition to Diaz because he feared that Diaz's rule would lead to a large social revolt in reforms. So Diaz jailed Madero, but more Mexicans were growing wary of his rule. And then Diaz fled the country, and Madero became the president in 1911. And then flames of revolution were stoked when Zapata called to break up larger estates, and he wanted them to give land to the workers. And then civil war followed after the assassination of Madero by the counter-revolution.
I just want to point out there, do you see what contention there was in Latin America because of the feudal system? Because very few controlled most of the wealth. When it finally came time for a breakaway from Europe and an opportunity for popular sovereignty, it was really difficult to do that because the system was set up to favor the very few, the very elite. And most of the serfs had to fight, or tried to fight, to get an opportunity. And that's still an ongoing struggle in much of Latin America that carried out of the feudal system. Most of the wealth is centered in the hands of very few people.
So the PRI, it's the PRI. It's the Institutional Revolutionary Party. And then in 1917, that was the constitution that was written by the constitutionalists, and it was promoting the equality of Mexican social, economic, and cultural life. And then through Zapata and Pancho Villa, even though they were assassinated, their government still like kept going. Like the government absorbed their call for revolution. And then their party, the PRI, controlled the Mexican government for quite a while, for like 70 or over 70 years.
Yeah, well, if you figure it wasn't until the year 2000 where Vicente Fox was elected with the PAN party, that's a phenomenal 83 years?
83.
It's a long time for one party to be in power.
Latin America in the modern era. While Mexico remained under the stable control of the 1960s to 1980s provide to be violent times elsewhere in Latin America. Democracy had sprouted in the region during the 1950s. Many people were inspired by the Cuban Revolution in 1959, which under communist ideology proposed to attend to the basic need of people. The threat that communist guerrillas and others posted in the 1960s and 1970s led the armed forces to take more active role in several countries. The military thought that the political class had to be curbed and the armed forces had to have the power to strengthen the economy and restore political peace. The military rule opened the door to abuse. Innocent civilians were caught up in heavy-handed efforts and defeat the guerrilla groups. People were basically like scared of them, so they wouldn't go against them. Actually, they would like.
Talking about the guerrillas, right? The guerrilla.
They would put some fear into like the people who are trying to fight them, so they saw them as like the good people, so they wouldn't really go against them. So they had the support of their people.
So can you see the struggle that feudalism caused when they finally were able to throw off European colonialism and the shackles associated with it? They wanted an opportunity for political and economic freedom, but the problem was the people who had the power in the land made it very difficult for that opportunity. And so the communists came in and said, hey, we'll be happy to come in and help you get equality. But the problem with that is once the communists are in power, there's no such thing as private property. You can't own your own stuff. So it was like it was a false promise. And then, so you're scared of them because they were revolutionaries. And on the other side, you got the military who didn't want communists coming in. And the poor average Joe Schmo stuck in the middle between these dictator military guys and then these communist guerrillas. So that's why so many countries in Latin America are just torn politically, torn economically. It's a real struggle.
Okay, so the legacy of colonialism. Colonialism is a political system in which an external nation takes complete control of a territory in another area of the world. So it's like the United States, like if they get a territory like in another country that's not here. Moreover, the colonized people do not invite the colonial power, nor do they have any say in how they are governed. Colonialism is by definition and practice undemocratic. Much of Asia and Africa remained under colonial control through the middle of the 20th century. In theory, the European rulers were preparing them for democracy. The main goal of colonialism was to extract resources and bring them to the mother country. Economically, each colony was directed to produce a few specific goods for export to Europe. After independence, countries often found that reliance on single crops could drive their economies prosperity or depression from year to year. So a fall in world price for certain crops could bring real hardship to an entire country. So like since they relied on like certain crops, like I know cotton was really big in coffee. So if like that's all they grew, and then the price went down, then that could cause like really bad like economic troubles for them. And most of the people that live in these like colonies owned by different countries, they didn't really like that because oftentimes they were the borders were set where like some people were forced to be together with like people of other ethnicities, and they didn't really have like a lot of traditions in common, so there was a lot of mistrust and stuff like that.
Yeah, in fact, you brought up Nigeria there.
Yeah.
Are you going to go there?
Yeah, I'm going to go there right now. So Nigeria gained independence in 1960 from Great Britain and experienced many of these problems. The British left Nigeria with a strong federalist system that placed power in the hands of 3 large ethnic groups. So when Great Britain left them, because I think it said that there was people in Nigeria, they spoke like 250 different languages, I think something like that. So there's a bunch of different like tribal groups, and only there was 3 main ones that were in charge, and the Igbo was one of them, and it supported an overthrow of the government in 1966. But Muslim officers from northern Nigeria responded with their own, I think it's coup, leading the Igbo to proclaim independence. Another military coup followed in 1975. This time the military committed itself to democracy and allowed free elections in 1979. The new government suffered from corruption, so the military intervened and created an equally corrupt government. It wasn't until 1999 that Democratic Republic to Nigeria, reputed to Nigeria, but ethnic tensions and general mistrust still continue. And I believe that there was also like a genocide. That's what it's called, right?
Yep.
Yeah, because of the different ethnic groups, and because there were so many different of them and they had different traditions, they couldn't really all agree on like what to do, and that's what caused like all the violence and hatred and mistrust against like amongst each other. So it was.
Yeah, and just to point out, this is a really important point about the whole colonialism, which explains many of the struggles and battles and wars and genocide going on today. Because after World War II, these European powers were so diminished in resources and military, they just basically withdrew from all over the world and left behind, very quickly, hastily drawn boundaries, which oftentimes squeezed together tribes and groups that had a historical hatred for each other. And so when the power's gone, the people who kept peace and control, once they're gone, that leaves a power vacuum. What inevitably follows is what? It's war.
Yeah.
It's war for control of the country, the resources, the people, and that's why you see Africa, a lot of people think it's just a poor continent. It is loaded with natural resources. Unfortunately, the countries there have such civil strife that it's impossible for them to harvest the resources in a free enterprise system. In fact, usually the power structure is a dictator, and the dictator siphons off the wealth and stuffs it in some foreign bank, and when the next coup comes around, or revolution, he takes off in his Learjet and goes and lives high on the hog with his entourage. And that's been a cycle that's gone on since the end of World War II. It's tragic. You see it in Asia, too.
Well, in Nigeria, the Igbo, they tried to overthrow the government and fight because they ruled the part where they had control like the oil, but they couldn't like seem to like see that as part of like the whole. So that's why like they all wanted to take control. And also like when the British left them, that's why it said the 3 largest tribes were the ones that ruled. So even though there was more tribes, they didn't really get like a say in anything. Fascism and communism. Both communism and fascist governments go to great lengths to address the idea of popular sovereignty, but they distort the concept significantly. Fascism is a political system in which the state has all the power. Fascism first appeared after World War I when Benito Mussolini came to power in Italy. In Germany, in the 1930s, Adolf Hitler's National Socialism rose to power. Fascism also appeared in Japan, Spain, and Argentina. Typically, a charismatic leader leads an all-powerful political party. In this type of system, they have total control over everything. Their economy consists of a centrally planned economy where the government has total control of the production of goods and services. These governments emerged out of the economic depression of the 1920s and 1930s. So in both the fascism and communism parties or whatever, the government, since they control everything, they control how much of everything is made. So I think, like, I read that oftentimes some of the people go without food or like things that they need because the government is the one that controls the amount that they make and the amount of services that they provide. Communist dictatorships. Communist states promote a left-wing ideology that followed the writings of Karl Marx. He believed that the works of the world would overthrow the capitalist free market system. Unlike fascist governments, communist regimes downplay nationalism. The decision-making power given to government in the name of the people regularly leads to abuse and repression. The People's Republic of China came into being in 1949. It emerged from the decades of civil war that pitted the nationalist government against the communist government. The communist government, led by Mao Zedong, won control of nearly all of China. Mao was bent on increasing agricultural and industrial production. In the Cultural Revolution, Mao's Red Guards attacked anyone who seemed to lack revolutionary fever. So his guards just attacked anyone who didn't believe in what he believed in. And they also destroyed ancient arts and books. After Mao's death, Deng Xiaoping came to power. The Chinese Communist Party remains the only legal recognized political organization. So in the Communist and Fascist Party, like, since they're led mostly by dictators, a lot of the dictators dictate over these countries for long periods of time, and even after they die or they get overthrown, then new dictators or new people come into power. So basically,
it's basically the new monarchy.
Yeah.
You know, some historians and political scientists will try and make a big deal between the distinctions between fascists and communists. Let's just be real clear. They're totalitarian regimes. They're at the other end of the spectrum from popular sovereignty. In fascist and communist governments, they believe that individuals serve the will of the state, and they're subject to the state. We, in the popular sovereignty ideology, believe that the government exists to protect and safeguard the God-given natural rights which have been given to us. So don't get caught up in the distinctions between fascists and communists. They're all totalitarians. They're all dictatorial. They all dominate life. They dominate the economy. There is no religion other than the state religion. That's totally the other end of the political spectrum of popular sovereignty, free enterprise, free market.
So another example of communism is the Soviet Union. Joseph Stalin was a dictator of the Soviet Union from 1929 to 1953. He transformed the Soviet Union into a military superpower, but he ruled by terror. Millions of his own citizens died during his regime. So, I think the way that he got to power is that he did the jobs that nobody else wanted until, he finally got his chance to rule, I guess. And this is the works cited page.